Hello, and welcome to Journey to SEA 2024. I am your host, Shelley-Ann Edwards Barron, and I'm here to talk with you about creative writing, reports, and narratives. Now, I had a really late start this morning, working on a lot of technical difficulties to get the to be on live today. I don't know what it is about this country. When it rains, sometimes, things kind of glitch, but I'm here and I'm thankful for those of you who are able to still, stick around and be here for the live. And we're going to be talking today about the creative writing checklists. I've decided to add in the narrative writing checklist as well, in addition to um, a little bit about character development if we actually get to that. Because, and drum roll, yesterday was SEA results, and I know there's a lot of buzz happening right now with the results. Some people are laughing, jumping, some are crying, some are like, meh, it is what it is, we do what we do. But there's a lot of energy being put into SEA results today. And so I thought it would be quite useful for those of you who are heading into SEA next year, 2024, for you to, step back a little bit and look at what the requirements are. Because I can tell you, looking at some of the results, especially with the creative writing, I know many people are asking the question, okay, so how exactly are these students graded? I mean, this student was typically getting 18 and 19 in, at school, and then, coming back with, 13 in after the exam. So then there's some questions there, and so I thought it would be really useful to kind of go through the requirements again. I know we took a quick look at it at the beginning, but it's also very useful to periodically stop and check and make sure we're covering what we're supposed to be covering to help the students get to where they need to be. So we're going to be looking at the rubric, the holistic rubric, again, as well as going through, well, a checklist of sorts. Is probably not totally comprehensive, but again, we're going to go through it and make sure that you understand what is required for the narratives, what is required for reports, so that you can prepare effectively. And of course, I have to say congratulations to all those who collected results. I know lots of happy dances around for me and my students. And one of the things that I absolutely please, I know I began a little late, but please allow me a few minutes to say a couple of things about SEA, especially in terms of the results and how parents and students are reacting to it. Just three things, right? I'm going to stop at three things because this could be a whole conversation, but that's not what we're about today. We're about the checklists and the requirements. So just allow me a few moments to talk about these three things. So, number one, I can tell you for a fact that the exam results, when it comes to creative writing, is a representation of the student's mark and the student's response in that exam. It is not a representation of the student's overall writing ability, but how they responded to that particular prompt on that day for that exam. And the reason I'm specifying this and I'm making it a point of mentioning that is because sometimes you have excellent writers who are very good with their words and so on, who, when they get the results, their scores aren't as high as expected. And one of the reasons I keep repeating, and if you go back through any of the lives, and those of you who are accustomed, looking at the lives, you'd hear me say over and over, remember this is an exam. Remember this is an exam. So while students are developing their writing skills and they do have to, be proficient and exemplary in certain skills in order to score high, remember, this is an exam. So, on any given day, a student meeting a prompt may not respond as effectively as they normally would have. We have the exam jitters, we have um, all kinds of different factors happening on that day. So, while it represents a score in an exam and it is used in a significant way, it is not always the representation of the student's writing ability. Because I have had students who are really great writers, but on the day, whatever happened, they didn't finish, different things, different factors, and their score isn't as high as expected. And having said that, the other thing is that if you are confident about the student's score, you are within your right to query. There is a cost for querying, but you are within your right to query because if the student has consistently performed at a certain level and their score does not reflect that level in any way, have a chat with the student. What happened in the exam? Did you finish? Did you know? If the student says, well, I know I did better than that score, because at this point the students should be aware of their own abilities. If the student says, I believe I did better than that score, and they're okay with the query, then definitely query. I had a situation when a student who, when I started working with her, she had some challenges and we worked through them. Her teacher worked with her as well. I worked with her. We refined her skills. And going into the exam, I was confident that even though her teacher and, others gave her 20, I'm of the mind that, 20 out of 20 going into exam is not exactly where you want to be. I generally try not to grade all the way up, but of course you need to have some sort of benchmark. So I do grade at, coming down to the end, but um I expected from her like about an 18 or so based on the progress that she had made and the ability that she was demonstrating. When her exam results came back that year, she got 12. And her mother said she got 12. And my heart sank because I thought the level that she was writing and her confidence and her, ability going into the exam, that 12 can't be right. So the mom said, I'm querying it. And I said, yes, please do. Please query it because that's a huge disparity. So she queried it, and the revised result was 19. So she jumped from 12 to 19. So I am recommending if you know the child's ability and you're seeing that the score does not reflect the ability that the child has, you are within your right to query, and so feel free, query. So the number one thing is that the result is a representation of the child's response in that particular exam. It is not a statement about this is the child's writing ability. This is an exam, and we have many things that can contribute. Two, there are times when querying, once you know the child's ability, please do query because examiners can make mistakes. It's not that they're always making mistakes, but it happens from time to time. So feel free, tap into that. The third thing is that I want to stress on the consistency and the progress and the development that gets students where they need to be at the day of exam. And for those of you who are following the lives and who are working the schedule or your own schedule, or you pop in from now and then with the lives, but you are working consistently, here's the thing that I've noticed: get to the good writing habits early and then practice and develop those. Because what's going to happen to a student on the day of the exam, when there is a little added stress, what's going to happen is that they are going to um, default to what they know and default to the habits that they have. So a student who is accustomed to just straight up writing and not considering any kind of plot or plan on the day of the exam, unless they have developed a habit of doing differently, they are going to revert to what they know, which is in the heat of the moment, I'm just going to write. So you really want to consistently work on the skills and strategies and consistently develop the habits that are going to get the student to the point of being comfortable enough that when they get into the exam, in the heat of the moment, in the excitement, under the pressure that they are under during the exam, they would revert to things that they know and the consistency that they've developed over the time of practice. And that is what is going to help them get to the point of falling back on the good practices that get them the scores that they need. So the results are in, and yes, like I said, we're happy dancing and celebrating with everyone because for me, for me, a student who goes from 8 to 10, that's a happy dance kind of moment. A student that goes from 10 to 14, that is happy dance kind of moment. The same kind of happy dance that I would do for a student who goes from 16 to 18 or from 12 to 16, because the point of it is progress and development and showing that you are getting the ideas. Because this is one stage, remember, right? This is one stage. And after this stage, students are going to go into secondary school and they are going to review some of these things and move forward with their studies. So if they have that foundation, when they get to the writing in secondary school, they would already have the foundation that's going to serve them well during secondary school. And even at this point, in one of the groups that I'm in, there is the there was a comment made by a secondary school teacher, and at first I was like, but we should be happy though. And there's part of me that has a challenge with the approach. However, she's not wrong. Now, what she said was that looking at the SEA results, the document that the ministry issued, and the overall improvement, based on the nature of the exam, she expected the improvement to be even more significant. So if you look at that document, and if you haven't seen it yet, you can check in those SEA groups if you're in any of them. Um, but or you can check on the Ministry of Education's Facebook page, check on their website to get the document where they analyze the results and compare to previous results. So we recognize that the 2021 was a dip, the 2022 was even lower. Now in 2023, the overall statistics of those who are into the 90s and those who are above 50, those who are the 30s, and so there's a range where we sort of benchmark the students. And according to the ministry's statistics, the number of students who did better this year, over 50, has increased and increased by double digit amounts, if I remember correctly. Um, so the idea is that overall there was improvement. However, the teacher's comment was um, that she's concerned that students are coming into secondary school not having everything that they need, and then secondary school students and teachers have to work extra hard to fill in the gaps because then we have CSEC coming around. So while we are celebrating and we understand what's happening with the students today, after the SEA results yesterday, we do have to keep in mind that the journey continues. And by all means, and yes, I did my happy dances already for those who checked in. I happy danced for those who didn't check in as yet. And I'm giving people some time. But the idea is that education continues, skills continue developing, students are going to be working on developing and adding to what they already know. So take a break, take a rest for those who are celebrating, and get into, relax a little bit. Hard work, we're proud of everything that you've done. But remember that this is only one stage of the journey. And while I'm speaking to them, I know most of the people who are looking at this live are those preparing for SEA 2024. So I'm saying that in your hearing so that you can recognize what the situation is as you go into it as well. Because while we are aiming for the high scores, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today in terms of what makes the difference, it's important to recognize that you're also building skills that are meant to serve students into their secondary school career and make secondary school not as difficult or tedious, so that they have a foundation that they can work with and develop on in secondary school, so that that period of their life is not going to be another bout of lots and lots of lessons just to pass an exam kind of thing. So, systematic development, systematic approaches, building the right kind of habits where writing is concerned, that is what is going to lay the most solid foundation upon which students will build eventually. So, all right. That is my, soapbox for the moment. I'm off of it now. And so we're going to get into really kind of understanding what the examiners look for and what is going to help students break into that 18 to 19, 20 kind of bracket, what gets them solid in the 14 to 16. And when a student scores below that, what it could mean and what you would be able to do as a parent or as an instructor to help them move forward. So, like I said, while I don't generally like the grading, because I'm an after school tutor and I work with that specialty area, I don't personally have to grade all the time. What I do quite often is based on the work that I do with a student, it is supposed to reflect in their marks at school. So, whatever I'm working on with a student, the grades that they get at school should be steadily increasing, or at least the teacher at school is supposed to be able to recognize I am seeing improvement in this child's writing. So that's my job. So that is what I work on. So that for those who are in school situation, teachers do the grading. So that is how I judge. If you're not in that kind of situation, my recommendation is to grade like every few weeks to see how the student is performing, so that you can, monitor the improvement and so on, and really dig into where the challenges are that you would need to refine. So, all right, so let me share my screen now and we would look at um, what is required for report writing and what is required for narrative writing. So we'll start with the reports, and I'm going to do the holistic rubric first, and then I would do a sort of checklist of the skills, so that you'd be able to recognize how to get to where you need to be, because you would know what is required for that space. All right, so let me present. Yeah, I have to add some files to my work to the station. I was going to just share screen, um, but I realized that I should probably um, put the file instead which would be easier to navigate through. All right, so, okay, is it uploaded yet? All right, so what we're going to go through, so we're starting with exemplary because I really want you to see what you're aiming for, and then we will see what you're missing and where, if you're missing certain things, where it would place you. So, because, I always remember there's an analogy with looking at counterfeit versus real bills money. And one, I think they were training agents, and somebody asked, there's a new counterfeit type coming out all the time. How do you recognize all the counterfeit? Well, what is the strategy? Study the original. So if you know the original, you know what it's supposed to be, then you'd be able to recognize if anything is missing. So that's what we're going to be doing, studying the exemplary, which is 9 to 10, out of the SEA style, and that would give you your 20s and so on, 18 to 20. So we're going to study that so that you would recognize when something is missing. And then based on what's missing, I'd show you where a student can fall. So if you're trying to understand, navigate this whole thing, that's what hopefully today is going to help you. If you know anybody who needs to understand this, share the videos. The videos are available in SCA Peaceful Approach Facebook group. If you're already a member, awesome. If you're not and you're looking at this on my page, or that's Wood Coach Youth Facebook page, or on YouTube, please feel free, join that Facebook group, SEA, the Peace Filled Approach, because we also cover math and grammar and comprehension. So you get a very holistic approach to the exam and lots of support. So you should see the comments in the group today and of yesterday. Lots of people asking questions, getting advice, whether it's transfers, queries, support, and what to do if the school fees, because there are fees now, um, and what to do. So there's a lot of support in that group. So if you're not already a member, please feel free to join. You'd get way more than just the creative writing. There's a lot happening there to support students and teachers and parents, because we believe in SEA, the peace filled approach. The more informed you are, the more supported you are, the better you will perform and be able to help your students or your child to perform. All right, so let's see. The holistic rubric should be up, and I can share. I think that is, let's see, is that as big as we could get? I think this is why I normally shared. Um, let's see, can you see that? It's kind of tiny. So that is the extent of it. So you know what? I am going to share my screen because I think you would see it a lot better if I share my screen. So let me try that instead. All right, there we go. So yeah, I think that is a lot better in terms of being able to read it. And I'll be scrolling up and down. I'll let you know when I'm ready to scroll so that it wouldn't affect you too much. But yeah, this is way better. Okay, so here's the thing. Let's look at that exemplary. I'm going to read it out, and then I'm going to point out a couple words to you, and then we would look at what happens after that when we go down. The response contains details which are carefully selected, specific and relevant to genre, audience, and task. Main ideas are specific to the task and are developed skillfully through relevant supporting details. Factual language and a formal tone are used exclusively throughout the report. Fluent, varied sentences enhance the clarity of the report. Clear and detailed introduction, body, and conclusion. Yeah, that's not a complete sentence, but I think you get the idea. Transitional words and phrases are used to skillfully link ideas and supporting details throughout the report. So let me read that again. Transitional words and phrases are used to skillfully link ideas and supporting details throughout the report. Information is clearly organized and logical sequencing of ideas, paragraphs, and details. Yeah, I need to slow down and read that again. Information is clearly organized with logical sequencing of all ideas, paragraphs, and details. Minor lapses in grammar, spelling, or punctuation do not detract from the fluency and clarity of the report. All right, so you survived me reading that, but thank goodness I'm sharing screen so you could follow along, right? So, okay, so let's analyze that a little bit and look at what are the main points and what gets a student into this category. I'm going to go sentence by sentence, but not go through the whole sentence. I really just want to point out a couple words in each sentence to you so that you could see where examiners are thinking and what they are actually looking for. So the first thing is that we're looking for, well, examiners are looking for a holistic response. Now, notice this is titled Holistic Rubric. So we are, I keep saying we, I don't mark SEA, let me just make that clear, but I have colleagues and friends who mark SEA, and so we have these conversations. So what I'm telling you is based on my understanding of how the examiners look at the essays. All right. The report has to have a complete or holistic presence as a report. And after that holistic presence is assessed, examiners are going to be going through looking for certain things. Now, once that holistic presence is there, these things are generally present, but there may be, different levels of how they are represented. And when I say holistic presence, here's what I mean. When the examiner reads the report, it needs to sound a certain way. Now, when we read something, we get a certain tone from what we read. We get a certain impact from what we read. And that impact has to be an impact that contains details which are carefully selected, specific, and relevant. So, those are the three things that we need to look at: carefully selected, specific, and relevant. So, overall, what is in the report has to be something, well, those details have to be carefully selected. So, it's not just, okay, it's relevant, so we put it. Remember, the main thing about a report is sharing information, and you have a certain length of time to do this. So students have to think strategically and critically. Do I include this? How important is this to what I'm trying to share here? And how do you know if it's important or not? Well, it's specific and relevant to whom and to what? To audience and task. So, audience would be, who are you writing the report to? Not just the examiner, but who are you writing the report to? Many prompts would say, write a report to your principal or write a report to the officer in charge, or, they do direct. So, we have that aspect of it. And we also have the task. Is it relevant to the task? And famously or infamously, there was the situation, I think it was the 2019 list of reports. That's the time when report writing was done. Many students misinterpreted the prompt because the prompt said a student was injured on a field trip. And so students who misinterpreted the prompt gave lots of details about the field trip and not so much on the injury and how that happened. And of course, if the prompt says a student was injured on a field trip, write a report about that situation. What you're focusing on is the injury. which makes it an incident report or an accident report, depending on how it happened, and not a field trip report, because the field trip is just the location, not the main focus of what happened. So that student who would have responded in a very eloquent report about a field trip could not score well because the information, though carefully selected and specific, was not as relevant to the task as it should have been. And so, analyzing prompts and recognizing how to respond, that is a big part of what gets a student into that 18 to 19 and 20. Now, let's look at what else does it. Main ideas are specific to the task. So notice this is a kind of repetition. We've already noticed that we want careful selection, specific and relevant details, but now we're looking at the main ideas specific to the task. And then we have that skillful development, skillful presentation. So you'd notice that word skillful a couple, I think is at least one other place, or skillfully, I believe it is. But what gets students into the 18 to 20 is not just the presentation of the report itself. What gets them into that 18 to 20 is the skillful presentation. And what makes that, what's the difference with the skillful? Well, skillful and regular, or competent. Let's look at the rest of it because it is very clearly outlined. Factual language, formal tone. Now, we're not looking at just the vocabulary. You see that concept of formal tone? I dealt with it in a previous video. You can go through on YouTube, especially on my website, and it's labeled so you could find that one quickly. I don't remember which one. But formal tone is more than just the words used. Formal tone has to do with sentence construction, with transitions, with a few other things. So that's what we're looking at, the factual language and formal tone. And this is exclusively. Then we want fluent and varied sentences. So the rubric outlines exactly what examiners look for. Fluent, varied sentences. So we don't want all long sentences because we're looking for that sophisticated fluency. So therefore, all our sentences must be a mouthful and make people have to breathe in between. To, we have to pause to breathe in order to complete the sentence. That's not the point. The point is we want a variety. Examiners are looking for a variety. So some short, some long, depending on what is required at the time. And this is where the critical thinking comes in the creative writing component. How do you select? Then we're looking at clear and detailed introduction, body, conclusion. All writing has a beginning, middle, end. In report writing, because it's all about sequencing and chronological order, the way that beginning, middle, end is presented is critically important. So therefore, students have to follow that beginning, middle, end structure. Now notice it simply says introduction, body, conclusion. It doesn't say 4 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, or any length of, anything. Introduction, body, conclusion. Once that is clear, we're good. However, and this is my however, students who are able to sequence their ideas effectively are better able to present that introduction, body, conclusion. And that 5 paragraph report is one of the ways that students can effectively understand the 5 sections of what it is they're writing. So if you break the body up into 3 paragraphs, you have your intro and your conclusion, and you break the body into 3 paragraphs, then that works perfectly. If your student doesn't write quite that much, then what do you have? Introduction, body, conclusion, 3 paragraphs minimum to really get that sequencing in order. So a student can write a very well done 3 paragraph report. I do not believe that they would score 9 and 10 because with 3 paragraphs, if they're written effectively, um, in terms of the length and so on, you may be missing some details that a student who gives you the 5 paragraphs may be able to tap into. However, you can still score quite well with 3 paragraphs. So how the paragraphs are developed, that's important. Transitional words and phrases. And this is something that I stress on because I see students working really hard on remembering their transition words, but then they neglect transition phrases. And that's where you can, step out of that exemplary and end up in proficient if your transition phrases are not present or used effectively. And here is where we have that skillfully linking of ideas. So, linking ideas is absolutely important and it has to be skillfully done in order to score exemplary, right? So then we move on to information is clearly organized, logical sequencing of ideas. For reports, we're looking at chronological order, which is time order, first, then next kind of thing. And then after having done all of that, it has to be presented with minor grammar, spelling, punctuation errors that don't take away from the clarity of the report. So we do definitely want grammar, spelling, and punctuation to be clear, but examiners understand the context in which students are writing. So if you have 1 or 2 errors, then, and it's not a matter of, what are they trying to say here? Then it's still not going to take the student out of that 18 to 20 bracket. So, based on what I just explained, some of the things that take the students out of the bracket, generally, from what I have seen, formal tone, where the vocabulary is the focus, but not the expression and the use of the vocabulary with those transition words. And once you're using your transition words and phrases, and I must stress phrases, once you're using transition phrases effectively, you are going to immediately tick off transitions and formal tone because they work hand in hand. So that's one. So transitions that help you create the formal tone and the details that are enough. Sufficient details, enough information is given so that examiners don't have to ask important questions, and all of that carefully selected without the grammar, spelling, or punctuation errors, as the case might be. So that is what gets you in the exemplary. When you miss any part of that, what happens is that you are going um, to end up in some challenges. So let's make a list, I guess. Um, what does that look like in terms of a kind of checklist? Let's do a quick checklist for, oh, I'm seeing a comment. Thank you very much. I'm glad. Please listen. I I say this all the time. Please tell me if what I'm saying is helpful because I really need to know that what I'm giving you, I mean, I know what I'm giving you is useful, but are you finding it useful? Am I communicating it effectively? That's really what I want to know. Am I communicating the information effectively? So thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. So, all right. So let's look at the what helps you get into that. So this is a kind of checklist of sorts, right? So we want to know the difference between relevant and irrelevant detail. Yeah, something is missing there, right? So difference between relevant and irrelevant details. Just imagine that it's in there. Um, Topic sentence paragraphing helps a lot. Chronological order, big deal. Formal language, absolutely important. Reported speech helps tremendously. transition words and phrases. We want to get that facts versus opinion thing clear because we want facts only. Remember, the rubric said factual language. So we want to stay away from the opinions. And I did a video on that before. So if you want to go back and check that, past tense and various uses of the past tense, right? So we have simple past, past continuous from time to time, and past perfect from time to time. So when we say past tense, we're not just talking about simple past. Once the student is able to understand the greater complexity of past tense and how to represent actions in the past, that is going to really get them into that 18 to 20. And then, of course, as I mentioned, formal tone. So these are specific to the report writing. General writing, we have to have that simple sentence structure clear. We need coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating conjunctions are the ones that really give you that complex sentence style. And so I could say complex sentences, but then how do you get that? Using the subordinating conjunctions. And those also function. You want to get those transition phrases that focus on time and so on. That really helps. Coordinating conjunctions help with the compound sentences, and but. So the subordinating conjunctions before, after, when, those types, those are the ones that help you with those transition phrases. Commas, please, especially with the transition phrases. You set off a transition phrase usually with a comma after it. In interjections, you set those off with commas. So comma usage is going to be a big deal in the report. Capitalization, most definitely. Spelling, grammar rules, tenses, pluralization, all of that. Legible writing, I mean, listen, examiners go above and beyond to make sure somebody could read the child's writing. But of course, if they don't have to put out all that effort, then it's going to be in the child's favor if the writing is quite legible and paragraphing is clear and so on. Planning effectively, I would say, really helps, especially if a student could annotate the prompt. That is something that is going to come in, I would say, by September, October, that term. By the end of the year, this year, students should be able to analyze and annotate prompts and do their quick planning. That definitely should happen. So that's it in terms of the report writing. So focusing on that, that is how you get students into that 18 to 20 and keep them in that 18 to 20. Because remember, a student might score really well on a field trip report, but give them an incident and they have an issue. Or if you give them an event report, they can't work on it. So being able to respond like this in a range of reporting situations is useful. So definitely always keep on practicing and checking in and practicing. Learn the foundation skills. Those are the required skills that I kind of went through there. Make sure students know that. But then when they get to the drilling, they have to be able to apply it. Um, so that, oh, somebody says that their daughter scored 18 out of 20 in the exam. Yay, happy dance. That is awesome. So definitely, yes. So work on these things, and you have some time, because remember what I said, we're building habits, so that by the time you get to December, all the habits would be there, and then you're refining those writing habits. So work on the foundation skills now, work on the sections now, so that they have that to fall back on, and when they're under stress and they're not sure what to do, they can relax and, okay, this is what I have to do. They have a plan, they have a strategy, and so on. So, all right, so let me get to the report writing we just did. So let me get to the narrative writing. And let's take a look at that rubric, right? So that would be this one here. And I'll share the screen and we will do the same thing. So we're going to go through the exemplary, understand what that is, what you need to do to get there, and then I'll show you, okay, if you're missing certain things, where you would land. So, oh, before I do that, I should probably complete that with the report. So let me share the report writing rubric again, and I'll show you with the other sections of the rubric what that looks like quickly before I go on. So, all right, so we understand the exemplary. Proficient, if you, so everything still has to be carefully selected, but notice the word all is missing here. Um, Notice the word competently instead of skillfully, and notice the word adequately instead of exclusively. So basically, if a student understands what to do for report writing and they do it well, they would actually score between 14 to 16. That's the range of you have met the mark. Your skillful interpretation beyond that is when you get exemplary. So students who score 16, for example, are hitting the mark and they're doing it extremely well. So any student who scores between 14 to 16 hit the mark, they have done what was expected of them, and they have the marks to show it. The examiners were pleased. What makes the difference is that little extra skill in terms of, that's why I keep mentioning things like reported speech and passive voice and the transition phrases and so on. So those skillful things beyond, and being able to recognize how many details are required and that 5 paragraph structure, those things make a difference, because then you go beyond adequate and proficient. You've done what you were told, so you've done a little bit more than what you were told. So the exemplary really is setting those students apart who have that little extra skill. So they get that, past perfect effectively, and they know when and how to use it. Those are the skills that take you into the exemplary. And below that, progressing, you have the idea, you know what to do. Um, and you're doing it, but not quite there yet. But you're getting there, and we recognize that you're getting there. That's where the 10 to 10, 11, 12, 13, that's where those students would lie. They're getting it. Now that means, and if let's say your child or anybody you know ended up in that kind of range going into secondary school, remember this is progressing. They're getting it. And so in secondary school, they can continue and they will still do very well because they're getting it. So now is not the time to stop. You take a break, have some vacation. Yes, have some fun. Life is about balance, but then you go back at it. Don't stop, because SAA is done and now they're in Form 1 and you don't start again until Form 4. Continue, because again, and I'm repeating it, we're building the habits that when students are stressed and they don't know what else to do, they fall back on these skills that will keep them writing well. Right, so I think, and then emerging, we're now starting to understand report writing, makes an attempt, we're really in trouble area, and unsatisfactory is if they rewrite the prompt. And they might rewrite it in slightly different words, but it's still just rewritten prompt. So I'm closing that off. Sorry. I did say I was going to tell you when I was scrolling and closing it off, and I didn't. My apologies if you were reading. A copy of that rubric is in SEA Peacefield Approach. You can search the files, holistic rubric, and you'd get a copy there if you don't already have a copy. Right? So um and if it surprises you that a student would simply repeat the prompt, remember when students are under stress and they don't know what to do or how to approach a situation, they default and they do things that, seems easiest, and they try something. So I have never heard of a student getting zero. A student who gets zero has to, I mean, the examiners try really hard. If one person doesn't get it, they give somebody else, they walk it around to different tables so that, because examiners aren't about giving students low grades because they're trying to penalize anybody or anything. They're really trying to give the students as much benefit of the doubt as possible and to give them the most marks possible, because it works well for everyone when that happens. So it's really a matter of students try, and if they go to the exam and they still try to write something, they're still going to get a mark. So there isn't really a zero. The student has to not turn up or not write anything really. But there is still that attempt. So once you recognize, okay, there's an attempt, how do I help the student? They need to know what to write. So start with the structure. 5 paragraphs, what goes into each of the 5 paragraphs, even if the student starts with one sentence in each paragraph, start with that. Then you add another sentence until you get to about 3 sentences in each paragraph. And then after that, you're developing and you're into the proficient and you can get exemplary. But start with one sentence. What is happening here? We know what goes in the introduction. We know what goes into each one. Start with that one sentence. If there's nowhere else for you to go, start with that one sentence. And that is going to make a big difference in the way the student processes the information. All right, so let me get to the narratives now. And what do we have? Holistic rubric for narrative, share screen. Right, so here we have excuse me, here we have the rubric, and I'm going to read through this one just as I did with the reports, and then we will go through it. We would look at what you need to be here, 18 to 20, and then we would look at when things are missing, where you would likely fall. So, the response exceeds the expectation for the writing task. Setting is effectively developed with both time and place vividly established. Characters are skillfully developed through physical descriptions, actions, and dialogue. All elements of plot are expertly developed with purposeful sequencing regardless of chronological order. Vivid, descriptive, and figurative language establish clarity of narrative elements, while sensory details enhance the story. Skillful use of transitions and paragraphing add clarity to the plot structure. Minor lapses in grammar or spelling or punctuation do not detract from the fluency and clarity of the writing. So, that is exemplary. Now, this year, students responded to narratives, and I know some people are looking at scores and thinking, how the student systematically and consistently used to score 17, 18, and now I'm looking at a 12 or a 13. What happened? So here's where you can begin to understand what could have happened. But of course, if you have that wide a gap, then, like I said, I recommend do a query. You're within your right. It costs a little bit, but then you would understand if it is, this is exactly where the student is, or if there was some error or some issue with the marking or the grading, because it can happen. But if there's such a wide gap, but if your student is accustomed to scoring, 18 and they get 17, that's within range. Even if they get 16, that's still within range. But if they're accustomed scoring 18 to 20 and they get like 14, then you might want to check that and see what was the issue. But I would first check with the student because, like I said, Habits. Some students may have been working on certain things, and in the company of a tutor or an instructor, they're able to make the changes, but then on their own, under exam conditions, they default to what their previous practice was. Then they may not have been able to complete as they would have normally completed to get that 18 to 20, which is why students drill under exam conditions coming up to the exam so that you can get a sense of where the student lies. Up until that point, you're developing skills, but from December, you start drilling so that you have enough time to see how the student would perform under the pressure of the exam. If it is you can start a bit earlier than that, then that is even better so that you're drilling and you're identifying challenge areas, and then you're developing skills and strategies that they would implement. And that's the cycle. Do an essay, do a story, analyze it, see what worked well, keep doing that. What didn't work so well, how do we change this? What are the strategies for changing it? And then you implement that, write another story. So that's the cycle that it would go. Right. So now, what in here, the number one thing, I don't know if you noticed it, but when I read the rubric the first time, the first thing that I saw that hit me said the response exceeds the expectations for the writing task. So when a student performs at expected level, they're going to be at proficient because proficient is what they're expected to be. In order to get into that exemplary section, students have to exceed the expectation. Now, there's a bit here. We're going to go through a checklist after this, and I'd show you what I believe are the things that would, or the skills that would get you into that exceeding expectations. Um, but for now, let's just look at the rubric because the rubric actually does say. So here's the thing. If your setting is effectively developed with both time and place vividly established, you see that word vividly established? That is what makes the difference here between the exemplary and the expectation. If you have time and place, then that's what you're expected to do. Did you vividly establish time and place? That's when you go beyond. Vividly established means that we're not telling you it's in the afternoon, but we're talking about the sounds outside and the setting sun. And as the night is coming in, I know that it's evening. I don't have to say it's evening. I describe the evening for you. That is vividly established, and that's, you know, the time. But how do you vividly establish place? You do have to give some information on what is in the environment, objects, people, smells, sounds, all those things vividly established. Characters are skillfully developed. What are we looking for? Descriptions, physical descriptions, actions, and dialogue. Three things, not just physical descriptions, which is really heavily placed, not just dialogue, not just actions. Because it's a narrative, characters behave and they act and they do things. So your actions are generally covered. What you do have to include and what you have to pay attention to are those physical descriptions and the dialogue. I've had students tell me, Miss, I don't like writing dialogue, so I don't include any. But then you're out of exemplary immediately because you absolutely must have dialogue to be in exemplary. Your physical descriptions have to be integrated because we also talk about elements of plot expertly developed with purposeful sequencing. Plot has sequencing. I know students talk about flashback. Now, flashback is not the chronological development that reports have, but there's a purposeful development with flashback. Your audience needs to know that they're going into a flashback. Your audience has to understand the reason for the flashback. And flashback starts at a particular point. So there are skills and strategies for developing these things. Um, and then we have all elements of the plot. exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. Those are the basic development, the elements of plot. But how do you get rising action is one thing that students really have challenges with. And that's an area that you really have to get into when it comes to understanding plot. So, vivid, descriptive, figurative language. Those three things are separate. They work together, but they're not all the same. Recognizing that is an issue. Vivid description works with imagery. Descriptive means that when it is being presented, it's connected to what you're describing. So there is something that you're describing. So you're either describing an action, or you're describing a person, or you're describing setting, or whatever it is. It's descriptive, meaning that I am describing something. I don't just have vivid descriptions that seem to fall out of the sky. They're beautiful, but what are they connected to? Why am I sharing them? You need to have that connection. Um, then the figurative language. So we need both. And we were separating figurative language from imagery and the vivid description, so that we need the similes, metaphors, onomatopoeia, alliteration, hyperbole, the what was the other one? Personification. There are six of them that I recommend, and if you can have all six, then good for you. Those are the ones that really get, and there's the more figurative language, and the more you can demonstrate. So I think that really helps. And then skillful use of transitions. There are transitions in narratives as well, but the transitions in narratives are a little bit different. So we don't really want to focus on transition words. Notice there nowhere at any point said skillful use of transition words. It says skillful use of transitions. So transitions and narratives are a little bit different, and being able to do that effectively, that is what gets you into that 9, 10. And then, of course, we have the spelling and so on. So what gets you to the 7, 8? Um, we have responses relevant to the task. So once you're relevant, you're good. You're not exceeding expectations, you're meeting expectations because it's relevant. I'm going to be scrolling a little bit up and down here, so just be mindful of that. I may not always stop to say I'm scrolling, but just be mindful I'm scrolling. Setting is well developed with both time and place established. So we have well developed instead of vividly established. So it's there, and we mentioned some descriptions, but vividly established means a comprehensive, thorough development. That's the difference. Characters, I noticed there's a that slash, so you can only have one character. That's okay, but these are competently as opposed to skillfully developed. And we have any two. So if you miss your dialogue, you're proficient. You must have dialogue for exemplary. Any four elements of plot. So we have 5 elements of plot. Any four, you're good, you're proficient. Relevant, descriptive, and or figurative language. So if you miss some sensory details, um, that's okay. You're proficient. You're getting it. We understand. You know how to do this. Logical use of transitions versus skillful use of transitions. Um, and then we're facilitating the narrative as opposed to adding clarity to the plot. That's where the difference comes in. And then below that, you answered okay. You have time but not place, or you have place but not time. Um, you mentioned the characters, but you may not give any physical description or dialogue, but they're there. Um, we know that there's some kind of plot and so on. And then beyond that, um, we have some ideas. We know we're writing a story, but We're missing characters, we're missing plot, we're missing some things, significant things. And then finally, we were clearly off topic if we're not responding to the plot, to the prompt, sorry, effectively. And this goes back to what I said about the report writing. If we're missing plot and we're missing the ideas from the prompt. So we're asked to write about a situation that follows, but we write a whole story on what led up to the point, we're in trouble. We have to interpret prompts effectively. And if the prompt says, you and your friends, but you decide to write about George and his friends, we're missing the point because the story is about you, not a third person. If they ask about George and you write about you, you're missing the point. The story is about George and not you. So we're going to be writing a whole different thing, whether we're in first person or third person. Look that up. Third person, first person. First person, I. Third person, he, she, it, they. Kind of what's happening with other people as a narrator on the outside, whereas the other one is that you are participating in the story itself. There's a difference, and you have to know that how you're responding. If you don't respond effectively, you're gradually coming down to making an attempt. And then, of course, if you repeat the prompt, but you don't have any kind of anything that makes any kind of sense, then examiners are forced. And when I say forced, believe me, it hurts them. They're not out to say, look at this child, like zero. It's like, oh my goodness, I have to give this child zero. Nah, come, you read this. Tell me what you think. You have anything here to give, they really, really do try. So you don't have to worry about that once you're working. And yes, I just closed it. Sorry about that. I'm mindful of the time. I try to keep these presentations to an hour. I'm over an hour now, so I want to wrap up in the next couple of minutes quickly. Let me share the skills that I think are going to really help with narrative um, beyond what the rubric has identified, right? So let's see, share screen, and we're going here. All right, there we go. So we have to start at the beginning with an interesting hook. And when I say interesting hook, your hook has to function effectively. Um, does it really draw the readers in? Does it make them think? Does it make them curious? Does it build suspense right from the beginning? That's an interesting hook. Context and background. Who are the characters? Why are they where they are? What is happening before the whole drama begins? Readers want to know. I mean, we're getting invested in the stories, and sometimes, listen, I tell you, I get so invested in student stories, such amazing ideas, and I'm like, wait, what? What's happening here? Who's this person? Where they come from? How they end up in this story? Where they get that from? How did they? We just need to know how and why. We can just hint at it. We need some details, okay? Clear plot development. And I put clear plot development there. I'm going to add in um, that connection between the problem and climax. How do characters solve their problem? Um, we want the vivid description, definitely use of imagery, sensory language, figurative language, conflict. We need conflict development, not just one problem. Conflict development. That's how you get the rising action. Excitement and suspense, dialogue, excuse me. And the last thing I want to see on this is the use of literary techniques. These are just two examples, but remember, we're looking at an exemplary situation. That's what we're aiming for. So it's not just about telling the story, it's about how do you craft things effectively to tell the story. So, are you using flashback? Are you pausing ever so often to fill in the details? Remember, I mentioned context and background. We want to know, readers want to know, we get invested in stories, and we want to know where people are, why they're there, how things are happening. And this is why setting description is needed to be developed throughout. Where are we? We're moving, but where are we now? So that's exposition. So things like cliffhanger endings, and so we want a few skills and strategies, some literary techniques to be used in addition to the figurative language and the imagery. So so the more I chat with my colleagues who grade SEA, and I I assess student performance every year in terms of how do my students perform. I judge myself very harshly based on how my students perform. And so every year I think, okay, how could I have helped them even more? What strategies can I implement? So I am constantly learning to make sure I give my students the best. So what I am realizing is that there are two things, and I'm going to end with this. Um, Literary techniques, they really do need to be there, and they need to be done well. So if the cliffhanger ending isn't done effectively, it makes the story sound as if it's just abruptly ended, and you can lose marks for that. If the flashback isn't done effectively, it feels like the introduction wasn't done well. So those things are very, very important because they're the beginning and the ending. But you do need some techniques, and you do need to spread the descriptions around. So we do things, like description in action. Use an action to point toward a physical description of a character, or use an interaction with the environment to give both physical description of character and setting description. These are techniques that enhance students' writing and get them into that exemplary. So all right, so this presentation way much longer than I intended, but yeah, I had my soapbox at the beginning, so I might need to, put a little disclaimer on this one when I do the recording. But I hope that that helped in terms of understanding what you're aiming for and how some of the things that you can do to get there, how to get there. And throughout this entire series, what I am doing is helping you build some of the strategies. And of course, I can't, and I did it again, my textbooks. So I'm going to put the link. The report writing textbooks help with that, I have the full series now. So you have the journal, you have the workbook that have additional information like some things on past perfect and so on, a bit on punctuation, some extra details to help really support the report writing. And absolutely, most definitely, the plot development. Get students to memorize that plot development now because you don't want them having to figure out plot when they're drilling. They should know it in their minds and be able to recognize how to do it. So they have to get the plot clear now so that they can spend their time working on the transitions and the techniques that are going to get them there. So they really, really do need to get. So I'm going to stop sharing and just wrap up by saying, please help your students build the habits from now that they can default to under stress that would really give them the best, best, and most um, effective options for doing what they can do during the exam. And recognize that a student 14 to 16 did well because they've done what was expected of them. And to a very large degree, they've done it well. The exemplary techniques, in order to get there, you have to have the foundation first. So build the foundation now so that September to December, you are able to introduce those exemplary techniques and then drill them before the exam. So, thank you so much for those of you who were able to stick around. I know this was way longer than usual, but just with me talking, I tried to share some slides to kind of break it up, but I do appreciate that you stuck around. This is going to be recorded so that you can go back to it. It is recorded. It's going to be an SEA Peaceful Approach on my Facebook page, on YouTube, and on my website. So there are multiple places. So if you're not on Facebook, you can still access it at any time. You could share it to people who are not on Facebook. And and if you want really to find out more about how to do these things, I'm doing a professional development workshop series, how to teach narrative writing, how to teach report writing, how to give effective feedback, because feedback is really where it is, right? You give the foundation, but then it's in fine tuning that you really develop those exemplary skills. So being able to give the effective feedback is going to be important. So I'll put the link to those in the chat and the courses that I'm doing this vacation. I'm taking a break next week. So my classes are starting on the 17th, but I'll put the links so you can access them if you're interested. If not, I'm having the lives and you can continue working, you can get the materials and follow along, and I'll be able to guide you there as it goes. So, all right. Thanks again. And I really do look forward to awesome results. We had some awesome ones this year, and we're aiming for 2024 with even more awesome results. Okay. So have a good one, and I'll see you next week. All right. Bye bye, guys.